Bridges, with your host, Donnie Miller, connecting our community with information about issues and opportunities.
Hey, good Sunday morning and welcome to Bridges. I am so glad to have you with us. You know, lately we've been hearing names like Kid and Chaos and Maniac and Little Heads, Manor Boys, and folks, I got to tell you, these days, thanks to The Blade, those are some of the most talked about names in the community. The Blade has done a series of articles on the status of gang activity in Lucas County, and the community response to these articles has been interesting. We're talking to some folks today who have a perspective on gang activity, the kinds of things that are going on in the community available to these young folks that might help them make some decisions. And we're talking a bit about what the impact of the Blades article has been on this community. I'd like to introduce you to my guest this morning. We have Judge Dean Mandros,
Good morning.
Who is also a member of JLJ Vision Outreach. Is that right?
Yes, I'm on the advisory board, yes.
Good. Welcome. Welcome. I'm glad to have you here. We'll be talking about that just a little more. You guys all know Albert Earl. He is the consummate community activist when it comes to kids and issues of empowerment and dads, and he's a member of the Village 50. It's always great to have you here. Great to have you here. And Keith Jordan, who's the Director of Development for JLJ Vision Outreach as well. Welcome. Welcome you all. So what do you think? What do you think about this series of articles in the Blade? I really thought, if I can get us started, I just really thought that the response would sort of be a muted kind of, oh, there's, you know, the center city has issues with gangs, but not the kind of response that I've heard.
I think what happened is the ears were open, the opportunity was there for conversation. They did get that. The conversation that I was trying to see structured around this article was, what are we going to do to implement the change? We're showing the negatives that are happening with the gang involvement and the gang activities, but at the end of the day, are they showing any solutions? And that's where we need to start bringing the focus on our grassroots organizations and the agencies that are actually doing things to make a transition in our communities.
Well, but do you think the article helped or hurt the perspective that these kids are kids who can be saved?
I think it was a little bit of both. There was a couple of thoughts that I had in regards to the article. The first thought was that, which was recorded in the Blade, was that it was a good thing that the information was shared with those who didn't know the problem existed as bad as it did, because we've been saying this for some years now, and it's been falling on deaf ears. But on the flip side of that, some of the gang kids is using these articles as a stage to promote their lifestyle.
Exactly.
And that's the negative part that's going on. And as you can see, all this week, we've been having a lot of shootings. And I'm not saying that's the Blade's fault, but this is gonna do nothing to deter the situation.
Yeah, 2 infants were shot, as I understand it, in what was considered to be a drive-by just a few days ago over at
Cherrywood.
Cherrywood, one of the most difficult places, I think.
And then you had another incident over in the Boomer area where a guy got grazed by a bullet. You know, so
for those folks who don't know, you want to tell them where the Boomer area is?
Boomer area is the area between Auburn, Monroe, Upton area, call that Boomer. And in that area, you also have inflection of gang activity as well, infiltration of gang activity as well. But when we look at these incidents that are occurring, we need to say, before this even came out, one of the things that happened is a decrease in crime in the city of Toledo by 22%. Okay, we are doing different things to combat these ills in our community. Let's go to our schools. 37% decrease in our activities as far as safe schools, suspension, and expulsions. Those activities, especially gang involvement, starts on media, then it goes into the school. Kids can't learn in the classroom because of bullying and gang activity. When they're doing things, interest groups, community agencies, and grassroots organizations that are actually doing things behind the scenes that are making these numbers stand up, because the bigger agencies are making inclusive approaches for us to become part of the solution now. And we need to stay focused on that right now.
Okay, I'm going to let you take a breath right there, because I want to say something responding to what you said, Albert. You said that some of the gangs are using these articles as a stage. You know, I had a little different perspective about the article, and just a little bit. I saw, and I know everybody's going to send me letters and say that I'm this, bleeding heart liberal, and yes, I am, and I always have been, and hasn't changed since whenever it was. We were in 1970, law school. But when I read that article, I actually saw kids who were searching, who were reaching out for something, who were saying, remember that one kid in the article, and the article started out saying, since he was a little boy, he always wanted to fit in. He always wanted to fit in. The one girl kid who talked about just not having any friends. She had homies, she had goons, but she didn't really have any friends because nobody can help you. I mean, I wonder sometimes if we don't wait too late to intervene, and if intervention is not a Band-Aid, why aren't we looking at the core of these issues? The dads are not around. Poverty remains an issue.
I don't want us to use that as an excuse.
Not an excuse.
Or a crutch.
I'm not suggesting that it's an excuse, and I'm not suggesting that it's a crutch. I'm suggesting that it's a different place to start the conversation.
Well, this information that was in the Blade article is nothing new to those of us who've been involved in the criminal justice system. We've known that there's been a gang issue in this community, but Toledo is no different than any city of this size. You're undoubtedly correct that most people were unaware of this, particularly in the detail that was given in the Blade article, but I don't see this as new information. I don't see this as a more serious problem than we've had 10 or 15 years ago. It's just that a lot more folks now are aware of it, and that's a good thing in the sense that maybe now there'll be more people willing to engage and try to deal with some of these issues, because just as you alluded to, it's a multifaceted, complex problem in terms of both causation and what can we do to try to move these people away from getting involved in this type of activity.
Yeah.
And I agree totally with you, Judge. That's exactly what I said to Taylor Dungeon, that by it being made aware to those who didn't know, maybe now that will push them to do more in terms of solutions.
But
now,
go ahead.
But when you previous, what you said was some of the kids was reaching out. Don't get me wrong. I strongly believe that many kids would love to be out of that lifestyle.
Right.
They want something more.
Right.
But there are those, we have to be honest with ourselves, that is using that as a stage to promote
I would agree with that.
Yeah, and that's
I
what
would
I
agree
meant
with
by that.
You know, one of my concerns though about this article is that we already have at least the perception in this town that there's some profiling that goes on in particular neighborhoods. I am really concerned now that every time a black kid walks down the street over at Airport and Byrne, where, just now people are starting to feel like that neighborhood is changing a little bit, but every time a kid walks down that neighborhood in Airport and Byrne, because the article did say that there are no white gangs in town, most of the gangs are black, even though there are some white kids who belong to black gangs. I'm afraid that those kids are going to be profiled. Well, that we have maybe made people afraid. And I want to say that I appreciated the article a great deal. I thought she did an amazing job. Considering who she is and considering where she was assigned to work. I thought she did an amazing job. And I agree with you, Keith, that now the conversation is on the table. It is in your face. You cannot walk around it. I get all of that. But on the other side, have we made it tougher for those kids who are wearing their pants down to their knees? Like, we all had our thing. I mean, I had an afro that was out to here. We all had our thing. So the thing these days are kids with their pants down, sagging, and the sweatshirts and the hoodies, right? Have we made it difficult for them now?
Do we want it to be difficult for them? Are we trying to conform them to a traditional lifestyle that families know of the values that we don't even address in the schools anymore?
My point was not that. My point was whether we have made it difficult for that kid, regardless of what his family background is, because we don't know any of that when he's walking down the street.
Right.
Whether we've made it difficult for that child to walk down the street like anybody else.
I strongly do believe that it's going to be difficult for some of them, because there are kids who I know for a fact that go to Rogers that may wear red that's not in no blood gang. So that will make it difficult, because you know, kids and adults get profiled. But that was one of the things that I talked about when I talked about it on Facebook. I said, you have just did yourself a disservice by basically snitching on yourself. Now, you got this culture of kids that go by this no snitching rule, but yet you tell everything about who you are through the clothing that you wear, through the conversations that you have, through the tattoos that you have on, through the YouTube videos that you make. Nobody's a better snitch than you yourself, and that's the problem.
There's a lot of truth to that, because I've seen criminal cases where the evidence was YouTube videos that, and these were gang cases. I had a double homicide case this summer where they used an AK-47 type weapon, and some of the evidence was a self-produced YouTube video where they had a similar weapon. So they do, to a certain extent, you're right, they advertise themselves. So they have to accept some responsibility in that regard.
I would agree with that. I want to mention, I want to ask about the presence of the dads. We talked earlier about, I mentioned that there was a different way to start this conversation. We could really, Keith, talk about it in terms of all of the services that are out there. But shouldn't we be saying to dads, you know, come on guys, step up. Yeah. Shouldn't we? The first time I met you, you reminded me that you were here talking about the importance of fathers in this process. I'm sure you are seeing a multitude of kids through your court where the families are dysfunctional, or dads are not present.
That's certainly true, but as I said, it is such a complex issue, because it's not just single family households, because there are plenty of single family households that the children don't get into this type of trouble. It is that. It is economic. What job opportunities do these young people have? It is part their lack of education, and so many of these kids invariably are dropouts and haven't finished school, and they don't have a realistic opportunity for a decent job prospect. So what direction can they go in? Sometimes it is just the social environment in terms of the neighborhood that they are forced to live in because of the economics. So what do you look at first?
But you know what, Judge, and I agree with you, but none of us have all of that. None of us have all of that. There are some things, though, that I think are key in the process, and I'm not saying this because it's what I necessarily think. I'm saying it because this is what these kids said in these articles. These kids said, where was my dad? I didn't have that role model. That would have been really helpful for me. I think sometimes, I know that there are times if you have an intact family, the issues of poverty get to be just issues. You know, the issues of going to a poor school just gets to be, it's the hand you're dealt, you know. More to talk about if you guys will stay with me while we go away for just a second. We need to leave you for just a second, but I promise we'll be right back.